When I saw the GPS history that night, I stopped breathing for a moment. It wasn't the destinations that broke me. It was the pattern. Every Friday, every Tuesday, the same address, a name I didn't recognize. And suddenly the late nights, the weekend work calls, the quick showers when he got home, they all made sense. I remember just sitting there on the edge of our bed, phone in my hand, the blue glow of the screen lighting up the darkness. His phone smelled faintly of his cologne, that woody, expensive scent he'd started wearing recently. And for a second, I hated it. It used to remind me of him walking through the door, wrapping his arms around me, whispering, "Missed you, babe." Now, it just smelled like lies. The GPS app kept showing the same location, a neighborhood across town, a house, not an office. And as I zoomed in on the map, my chest tightened. I whispered to myself, "What are you doing, Jason?" I didn't cry yet. That came later.
Jason and I had been married for 12 years. We met at a friend's barbecue. I spilled lemonade on his shirt. He made a joke about me marking my territory, and I laughed so hard my stomach hurt. Back then, everything about him felt safe. Reliable, the kind of man who double-checked the locks before bed, who texted me when he got to work, who remembered my coffee order down to the oat milk and cinnamon. We built a quiet life together in a little house on the edge of town. White shutters, creaky porch steps, a golden retriever named Milo who barked at mailmen like it was his life's calling. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but it was comfortable, predictable. And I loved that about it. Every morning, he'd leave around 7:30, kiss me on the forehead, say, "Don't work too hard today." I'd make my coffee, sit by the window, and watch him pull out of the driveway. Some mornings he'd look back and wave. Some mornings he didn't. It started small, the distance. A missed text, a canceled date night. "Babe, work's been insane lately," he'd say, loosening his tie, rubbing his temples. I wanted to believe him. God, I did. I'd offer to make him dinner, and he'd smile, half-heartedly. "Maybe later. I'm not that hungry." Then came the excuses, the overnight conferences, the last-minute client dinners, the traffic jams that lasted 3 hours. At first, I laughed it off. Jason had always been ambitious, the kind of man who needed to be needed. But one night, he came home past midnight, shirt wrinkled, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. That night, I didn't sleep. The next morning, as he showered, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at his car keys. Something inside me, quiet but sharp, whispered, "Check." So I did. Not his messages, not his photos, just the GPS history from his car. It was supposed to sync automatically. We'd set it up years ago for safety. And there it was, the same address 3 times that week. Each visit about 2 hours long. At first, I told myself maybe it was a client's house. Maybe he was helping a friend. Maybe anything. But my stomach knew before my mind did. That night, I asked him casually, "So, how was work today?" He looked up from his phone. "Busy, you know how it is." "Yeah," I said quietly, "I do." He didn't notice the way I was staring at him, the way I was memorizing every blink, every pause, every half second before he spoke. When you love someone long enough, you start to hear their lies before they even say them.
For the next few days, I pretended everything was fine. I cooked dinner, I laughed at his stories, I even kissed him goodnight. But I also watched the way his phone stayed face down, the way he smiled at nothing sometimes, that soft grin people make when they're texting someone they care about. And then came the night that changed everything. He told me he had to work late again. Big project deadline, a client from Chicago flying in, all the usual reasons. I smiled, told him to drive safe, and waited until his car left the driveway. Then I opened my laptop and checked the GPS. Same address, same time. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type it into Google Maps. It was a residential area, a small blue house with white trim. Someone lived there, someone he kept going back to. I stared at that little pin on the map for a long time before whispering, "Tomorrow. I'll know tomorrow." The next day, I took a half day off from work. Told my boss I wasn't feeling well. I parked 2 streets away from that address and waited. My coffee went cold. My heart didn't. And when Jason's silver SUV finally pulled up around 6:15, I held my breath. He got out holding a bag of groceries, laughing, relaxed, wearing that same cologne. Then a woman stepped out of the house, younger, pretty, casual, in an oversized sweater. She touched his arm like she'd done it 100 times before. And when she kissed him, softly, naturally, like it was the most normal thing in the world, that's when I stopped seeing clearly. My ears rang, my throat tightened. And in that single moment, everything I'd believed about our marriage, the trust, the safety, the loyalty, just disintegrated. I didn't confront them that night. I drove home numb. I showered with the water too hot until my skin burned. And when Jason came home later smelling faintly of wine and her perfume, I was already sitting at the table waiting. "Hey," he said, surprised. "You're still up." "Yeah," I said quietly. I couldn't sleep. He smiled, leaned down to kiss my forehead, and for the first time in 12 years, I pulled away. He froze when I pulled away. Just a flicker of surprise across his face. But in that half second, I saw something else. Fear. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by his usual calm, steady tone. "Everything okay?" he asked, setting his keys down on the counter. I looked at him, really looked, and it hit me how much I didn't recognize him anymore. Same green eyes, same messy brown hair, same slight scar on his chin from the time we went hiking and he slipped on the rocks. But now, he looked like a stranger wearing my husband's skin. "Jason," I said, my voice barely holding together, "where were you tonight?" He blinked. "You know, the office. I told you we're working on that proposal for the—" "Stop," I said. He froze again. There was a long, heavy silence between us, the kind that hums in your ears. I could hear Milo breathing softly in the corner, the clock ticking on the wall. Tick, tick, tick. "Whose house is it?" I asked. "The one on Elm Street." He flinched, just slightly, and in that moment, I didn't need him to answer. The truth was already spilling out of his silence. He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes darting toward the floor. You went through my phone?" "No," I said, my voice trembling. "I went through the car GPS, the one you set up, remember, for safety?" His jaw clenched. "Claire, this isn't what you think." "Then what is it, Jason?" "Because I saw you. I saw her." He stepped closer, hands raised slightly like he was calming a frightened animal. "Listen, it's complicated, okay? It's not complicated." I cut him off, my voice rising for the first time. "You mean cheating?" The word hung in the air between us like smoke. And I swear even the dog stopped moving. He sighed, shoulders slumping. "I didn't plan for it to happen. It just did." I let out a bitter laugh. "Right. Because affairs just happen, like the weather?" He ran a hand through his hair. "I wasn't happy, Claire. We've been distant for a long time. You've been so focused on work, and Don't you dare blame this on me." My voice cracked, and for the first time, tears stung my eyes. "You could have talked to me, Jason. You could have said something, but instead you found someone else." He stayed quiet, eyes glassy. "Her name's Lauren," he said finally. She listens. She understands me." That sentence sliced through me deeper than any confession could. Because I used to be that person, the one who understood him. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain ripping through me. But instead, I just sat down. My body suddenly felt too heavy for my bones. "How long?" I whispered. 6 months, he said softly. "It started after your mom's funeral. I didn't know how to reach you then. You were grieving, and I looked up sharply. "So you found comfort in someone else's bed while I was burying my mother?" He winced. "That's not fair." I laughed bitterly. "Fair? Jason, none of this is fair." There was another silence, colder this time. He looked at me, then at the door. "I think I should stay at a hotel tonight," he said. I didn't stop him. I just nodded, because if I opened my mouth again, I knew I would break apart. He packed a small overnight bag, avoiding eye contact. Before leaving, he paused at the door. I never meant to hurt you. And then he was gone. I sat there for hours, just listening to the echo of that door closing.
The next morning, I woke up on the couch with a headache and swollen eyes. The coffee maker beeped automatically at 7 a.m., just like it always did, the little sound that used to start our mornings together. Now it just reminded me how routines can outlive love. When I checked my phone, there was a text from him. I'll give you some space. I'll pick up my things later this week. I'm sorry, Claire. I stared at the message for a long time. No, I love you. No, can we talk? Just a clean, quiet ending, like he'd already rehearsed it. That afternoon, I called my best friend, Emily. She listened without interrupting, just soft breathing on the other end of the line. Finally, she said, Claire, you don't have to decide anything right now. Just breathe. But breathing was the hardest thing. Every corner of the house smelled like him. His cologne, his coffee, the faint scent of motor oil from his jacket hanging in the closet. Every drawer I opened had traces of the life we'd built, and every single one of them reminded me I'd been living with a man who had already emotionally left months ago. That night, I took off my wedding ring. It left a pale line on my finger, like a ghost of the promises we made. And for the first time in 12 years, I slept with the bedroom door closed. The next few days were a blur. He came by once to pick up his things. We barely spoke. He looked tired, guilty maybe, but I didn't care enough to ask. When he picked up Milo's leash from the counter, he hesitated. Can I take him for the weekend? I nodded. He deserves better than to sit in this tension. After he left, I sat down at my desk, opened a blank notebook, and wrote one line at the top. Who am I without him? I stared at it until the words started to blur, because for 12 years, I'd been half of Jason and Claire, and now I was just Claire. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the grief and anger and humiliation, there was a flicker of something else, something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom.
Freedom is a strange thing. It doesn't come rushing in like light through an open door. It seeps, slow, cautious, almost scared of being noticed. The first week after Jason left, I felt like a ghost haunting my own house. His toothbrush was still in the holder. His jacket still hung on the back of the chair. Everywhere I looked, there was evidence of him. And yet, somehow, he was gone. I didn't tell many people what happened, just Emily, my best friend. The thought of explaining it to my coworkers, my neighbors, his family, it made me sick. I didn't want pity. I wanted peace. But peace doesn't come easy when you've been lied to. Every beep from my phone, every unfamiliar car passing by, every quiet evening felt like a test. I hated how my body still flinched at the sound of the garage door, expecting him to walk in like nothing had changed. A few days later, I decided to see for myself what kind of woman he'd traded me for. I don't know if it was curiosity, anger, or self-destruction, maybe all three. But that address on Elm Street kept burning in my mind, so I drove there, not to confront, just to look. The house was smaller than I remembered, with a garden of overgrown roses spilling across the front fence. Her car was in the driveway. I recognized it from that night. A silver sedan with a dented bumper. For a long time, I sat in my car, engine running, hands gripping the steering wheel. And then, as if fate wanted to twist the knife a little deeper, she stepped outside. Lauren, the woman my husband had chosen. She was holding a mug, laughing at something on her phone, her hair messy from what looked like a lazy morning. And when Jason walked out behind her, coffee in hand, wearing his relaxed home self, not the distant version I'd been living with, something in me finally broke. They looked happy. That easy, quiet happiness I used to have with him. Before late nights, before GPS logs, before everything fell apart. I felt anger rise in my chest, thick and hot. But underneath it was something softer, humiliation. The kind that crawls up your spine and whispers, "You weren't enough." I drove away before either of them saw me. Halfway home, I pulled over and cried. Not the kind of crying that asks for comfort, but the kind that empties you out. That night, I opened my laptop and typed, "divorce attorneys near me." The next morning, I made an appointment. It wasn't revenge. It was survival. When I told Jason, he didn't argue. He just nodded, his voice quiet. "If that's what you want." I wanted to scream, "No, Jason, it's not what I want. It's what you left me with." But instead, I just said, it's what's fair. Days turned into weeks. I started going for morning walks again, something I hadn't done in years. At first, it was just to feel the silence, but slowly it became my therapy. The rhythm of my footsteps, the cold air on my skin, the sound of leaves crunching underfoot, they reminded me that I was still alive. I reconnected with old friends, took a pottery class, even joined a local women's book club that met every Thursday night. It felt strange, showing up as just Claire. But for the first time in a long time, that was enough. Emily would check in often. One evening she came over with wine and said, "You look lighter." I laughed. "Maybe because I'm finally done carrying someone else's lies." She smiled softly. That's the Claire I remember. A month after Jason moved out, he showed up unexpectedly. I was in the backyard repotting a plant when I heard his car. For a moment, my heart skipped. Old habits die hard. He looked nervous, standing there with his hands in his pockets. "Hey," he said, "I just came to drop off some of your mail." I nodded. "You could have left it in the box." "I know," he said, his voice quieter. I wanted to see how you're doing." I studied him, the man I used to love. He looked smaller somehow, not physically, but in presence, like someone who'd realized too late what he'd broken. "I'm okay," I said simply. He nodded, eyes flicking to the garden. "You've been taking care of the plants." "Yeah, they're easier than people." He winced. "I deserve that," he said softly. "Jason," I said, setting down the watering can, "you don't have to keep apologizing. You made your choices. I'm just learning to live with mine." He looked down at his hands. "She's not what I thought," he said suddenly. I felt the faintest flicker of something, not hope, just sadness. "Maybe she is, and maybe you just weren't who you thought you were." He looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time I saw regret, deep, raw regret, but it wasn't mine to heal anymore. After he left, I went back inside and stood in front of the mirror. My reflection looked tired, older, maybe, but there was a steadiness in my eyes I hadn't seen in years. I wasn't her wife anymore. I wasn't half of anything. That night I booked a weekend trip to the coast alone, a small cabin overlooking the ocean, no wedding ring, no shared schedule, no pretending. When I arrived, the air smelled like salt and pine. The waves crashed rhythmically against the rocks, steady and unforgiving. And for the first time in a long time, I let this sound fill me instead of the silence he'd left behind. I took off my shoes and walked into the cold water, ankle deep, laughing at how it stung. Somewhere out there, a part of my old life was ending, but in its place, something new was beginning. Divorce has a strange way of making people show their true faces. Some offer sympathy you never asked for. Others act like it's contagious, as if your heartbreak might rub off on them if they get too close. The papers were finalized on a rainy Thursday morning. I remember sitting in that sterile office, great carpet, coffee-stained table, a stack of legal documents between us. Jason looked exhausted, not sad, not angry, just drained, like someone who'd been running from something and finally realized there was nowhere left to go. When the judge asked if everything was irretrievably broken, I almost laughed. What a clinical phrase for something so devastating. I signed my name anyway, and just like that, 12 years became paperwork. Afterward, Jason offered to walk me to my car. I said no. He hesitated, nodded, then said softly, "You were a good wife, Claire." I looked at him, really looked, and said, "No, Jason, I was the wrong wife for the man you decided to become." And I left him standing there in the rain. Word spread quickly, as it always does. Our mutual friends tried to stay neutral. Some texted to check in. Others quietly faded away, unsure which side to choose. Jason's sister, Melissa, called me one evening. She'd always been kind, though a little distant. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "He told us everything. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry." I could see her genuine remorse in her voice, but also confusion, as if she couldn't quite reconcile her brother with the man who'd done this. "It's not your fault," I said gently. "He made his choices." What I didn't tell her was that I'd stopped needing apologies that weren't mine to collect. A few weeks later, Emily dragged me to a dinner party. "Come on,"
on, she said. You've been cooped up for months. You need people, laughter, something other than Netflix and sadness. I went, reluctantly, wearing a dress I hadn't touched in years. When I walked into the room, heads turned, not in a vain way, but in that quiet, curious way people look at someone they've only heard stories about. Claire, it's so good to see you, one woman gushed. I heard about, well, you look amazing, by the way. That carried more weight than her compliment. I smiled politely. Life happens, I said. You just learn to keep walking. It was awkward at first, the small talk, the careful questions. But as the evening went on, I started laughing, really laughing, the kind of laugh that comes from your chest, not your mask. At one point, Emily leaned over and whispered, "There she is." And I realized she was right. I was back, but life has a way of circling back to test your progress. One afternoon, while grocery shopping, I saw them, Jason and Lauren, in the produce aisle, of all places, domestic and ordinary, like the universe had a twisted sense of humor. They were standing close, quietly arguing about which apples to buy. For a moment, I froze, holding a basket of oranges. Jason saw me first. His face changed. Surprise, guilt, maybe shame. Lauren followed his gaze and instantly looked away. I walked past them, steady and calm. No dramatic confrontation, no angry words, just grace. As I reached the end of the aisle, I heard her voice, soft, anxious. Was that her? And his quiet reply, barely audible. Yeah, I didn't turn back because I didn't need to. That night, I lit a candle on my windowsill. Something small, something symbolic. It wasn't for him, it was for me. A quiet acknowledgement that I'd survived what once felt unsurvivable. Over the next few months, my life began to rebuild itself, piece by piece. I moved into a smaller apartment downtown, sunlight streaming through tall windows, plants lining the sill. I painted the walls pale yellow, a color Jason always said was too bright. Now it felt like sunlight trapped in paint. I adopted a cat from the shelter, a grumpy orange tabby named Rusty, who decided I was his human within minutes. He followed me everywhere, even slept on my laptop. He didn't fix the loneliness, but he filled the silence. I started freelancing again, photography work I'd given up years ago when Jason's career became the priority. My first exhibit was a small local showcase titled What Remains. The photos were of empty spaces, a half-drunk cup of coffee, an unpainted bed, a dent in a pillow where someone used to sleep. It was raw, but it was real, and people connected with it. When a woman at the gallery approached me in tears and said, "I felt this. I'm living this," I realized something profound. My pain had become someone else's comfort. One evening, months later, I got a message from Jason. It was short. "I saw your photos online. They're beautiful. I'm glad you're doing well." I stared at it for a long time before typing back, "Thank you. I hope you find what you're looking for." And that was it. No anger, no longing, no unfinished business. Just closure, the kind that comes when you stop needing an apology to move on. By spring, the house we once shared had been sold. When the realtor called to tell me it was finalized, I didn't feel sadness, just relief. It was no longer ours, and I no longer carried its ghosts. I spent that afternoon on the balcony of my new apartment, watching the city glow beneath a soft pink sunset. Rusty purred in my lap, and for the first time in years, I felt completely still. Heartbreak had broken me open, but it also made room for something new, me. Healing doesn't happen in one big moment. It happens quietly, in the small, almost invisible ways you start choosing yourself again. It's when you wake up one morning and realize you didn't check your phone for his name, when a song that once shattered you suddenly feels like just a song. When you walk past a restaurant you used to visit together and think, I could go there again, maybe with someone new, maybe alone. That's what healing looked like for me. It had been nearly a year since the divorce. I wasn't over it, because what does that even mean? But I was through it. The memories still came, but they no longer controlled me. One morning I stood in front of the mirror, brushing my hair, and caught myself smiling for no reason. Not because of someone else, not because life was perfect, but because I finally felt free. That's when I knew I was ready, not for love, not for revenge, but for living. I started saying yes more often. Yes to brunch invitations. Yes to weekend hikes. Yes to photographing strangers on the street just because their faces told stories. At a local coffee shop one afternoon, a man struck up a conversation. He was kind, soft-spoken, the opposite of Jason's loud magnetic charm. His name was Daniel. We talked about books, travel, and why people always forget to chase the quiet things that matter. He didn't flirt, he didn't push, he just listened. When he asked for my number, I hesitated for a moment. Not out of fear, but reflection. Then I said, sure, not because I was ready for a relationship, but because I was ready for a possibility. Months passed, and life began to take on a new rhythm. My photography business grew. My work started getting featured in small magazines. People described it as intimate, the kind of art that feels like breathing someone else's truth. I started mentoring younger women, those quietly trapped in unhappy marriages, unsure whether to stay or go. I never told them what to do. I just said, you'll know when you're done. It's the moment you stop begging someone else to see your worth and start seeing it yourself. One of them, a woman named Heather, hugged me after a long talk and whispered, "You gave me courage." And that night, as I lay in bed, I realized maybe that's what my pain was for. Not to destroy me, but to teach me how to help others rebuild. The following spring, I returned to that coastal cabin, the one where I'd first gone alone after everything ended. But this time, I wasn't running from something. I was returning to something. The ocean was calm, the sky painted in hues of lavender and gold. I stood barefoot in the sand, eyes closed, letting the wind move through my hair. And in that stillness, a thought came, simple but powerful. I didn't lose him. I just found me. That night, I wrote in my journal, maybe healing isn't about forgetting. Maybe it's about learning to live with the scars and realizing they're proof you survived. Maybe the ending wasn't punishment. Maybe it was permission. I closed the notebook and smiled. The moon was full, reflecting on the water like a promise. And for the first time since that night, the night the truth shattered everything, I felt grateful. Grateful for what I lost, grateful for what I found, and grateful for the woman I finally became.